Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on impact measurement. I'm Lori Foster with the Global Corporate Volunteer Council of IAVE. And for today's webinar, we ask that you keep yourselves muted because that allows us to hear the speakers better. As many of you know, last year we published Corporate Volunteering for a Post-Pandemic World. And one of the chapters of that research was on impact measurement. And in it, we noted that it's a significant challenge for the field. It remains very difficult to articulate the impact of corporate volunteering and its value to the communities it serves, the individuals who work on volunteering, and also the companies. To address this critical topic, we have partnered with True Impact. First, we will review the methodology and learn how two companies who are on our panel today apply it. There will be an opportunity for questions and answers, so when they occur to you, feel free to put your questions in the chat. Leading our discussion today will be Sadie Miller, who is True Impact's Director of Customer Success. Sadie provides clients with in-depth research, analysis, project management services. She works on benchmarking initiatives and specializes in social impact evaluation. She brings expertise in civic engagement, community partnership development, policy analysis, and she worked at Williams College, Campus Compact, the Corporation for National and Community Service, and the Brandeis Center for Youth and Communities. So Sadie brings a wealth of expertise. She's going to lead us off and then bring in her two panelists. Thank you, Sadie.
Oh, thank you so much, Lori. When I had the chance to bring some of our clients into a conversation about the value of volunteerism, I immediately thought of these two people. Because when I think about who's out there doing the work, it is Lee Fabiacci and Anna Schmidt. You will not see them on the conference circuit or authoring think pieces. But if you are in the work at these companies, you cannot get away from the vision and movement of these two women. So I cannot wait to listen to them share more about the work they lead and how to make meaning of it for their employees, their leaders, and the public. Before we get Lee and Anna on the hot seat, I'd like to talk about how we support our partners in measuring their volunteerism. My plan is to set you up with the basics of measuring the social outcomes of service, and then we can discuss how it happens in the real world. We focus on measuring company-sponsored volunteer service, supporting an organization to achieve social good. What we need to know to do that is how much good the organization does and how much volunteers contribute to that organization's outcomes. So we'll need to pin down social impact and then calculate the portion of impact that can be claimed by volunteers. Using our four-step framework, you'll start by monetizing volunteerism. And you can do this using your internal tracking systems. Then work with nonprofit partners to quantify programmatic impact and operating costs. With the value of service provided and the cost to create the program's impact, you can calculate the impact of your service. This is your claim. And finally, take the numbers on the road. This work is meant to be shared, and I think that you'll see that service, when strategically managed, is as valuable as cash and a very smart addition to your CSR investment portfolio. Monetizing volunteerism is where we all need to start. You will need to have a system in place to track how many hours of service you support and what kind of service is provided. This can be a whole volunteer management platform, a software platform, or it can be a simple spreadsheet of events that you sponsor. But it needs to include a column for what you do and a column for how many hours you do it. Then we calculate the total financial contribution of volunteerism by multiplying the hours served and the value of that service. I recommend using the Bureau of Labor Statistics occupational wage data times 15.7 for fringe benefits to monetize the value of a volunteer hour. This data is all readily available on the BLS website, and it matches the independent sector's approach to calculate the annual value of volunteerism. So 2 things to write down: BLS, occupational wage data, and the independent sector's approach. If you support international volunteers, you can use the National Bureau of Economic Research. They publish an occupational wages around the world database. And you can kind of get as geeky as you want to with all of this, or you can just throw in the towel and use the independent sector's single value for service. I will not judge you there. But there is something special that happens when you disaggregate volunteer activities by value. You can start to see the difference between a big team building meal packaging program, which averages $13 an hour per volunteer, and a quiet little board service program that's humming away throughout the year, where volunteers are generating $60 an hour in value. So if you do take the value of specific volunteer activities, you'll start to see where you can provide the most value to nonprofits. Because while it seems easier to manage and motivate volunteers to provide food preparation, you would generate more value for the nonprofit by shifting towards skills-based volunteerism. So you have step 1, the financial value of your volunteerism. And step 1 is where many companies stop. But our approach includes seeking the social outcomes of your work, the cost of those efforts, to push our understanding from what we gave to what we made happen. You will need to collect the impacts of the supported program and the cost to implement that program. And this is a part of reporting that is so common when we make grants. What happened as a result of this funded program? When you think about service as having a monetary value, just like these inputs here, cash, staff, equipment, you can start thinking about program outputs to program outcomes. Now we use a super simple logic model to break out outputs and outcomes: reach, learn, act, and succeed. So you can ask your nonprofits, how many people were served by the program? Did they gain skills or motivation? Did they change their behavior? Did anyone improve their well-being as a result of the program? And this is not about volunteers. This approach doesn't actually care if your volunteers improve their well-being. What we're talking about, to use a Deloitte pro bono example, is the high school students at Cristo Rey School who are working at Deloitte with Deloitte employees. And because of those volunteer mentors, their first real job gets to be a better second job. They graduate high school and know they want to earn a degree. They know what it looks like to work at an office, and they know that they can do it. The outcome is improved educational and occupational successes for students who would have been bagging groceries without Deloitte volunteers. So there are barriers to collecting outcomes because we fundamentally do not value service as much as we value cash grants. And because of this, neither do nonprofit partners. Nonprofit organizations have grant writers, development professionals, and evaluators who are responsible for reporting on the outcomes of grant-funded programs. A request to report on the outcomes of a volunteer-supported program doesn't have an owner for most nonprofits. So you're asking the nonprofit to do a little bit more work than they expected, or often what they signed up for, because there's rarely a memorandum of understanding with a kind of reporting expectation in it for volunteer programs. So we recommend that you keep this as simple as possible. 10 question surveys, less than 20 minutes, and lots of time and kind follow-up emails. If you can, let them know early on. Deloitte is so good at including a reporting expectation for their pro bono partners in the application process. That's very smart. Also, if you can, share results so that the nonprofits can leverage your reporting resources to showcase their program. So that quick survey got you two important numbers: how many people benefit from a program and how much the overall program costs to implement. Now you're going to calculate what you can claim of that program's outcomes based on your level of support. So take the financial value of your service and divide it by the total program cost. That's the percent of the program you contributed to. Multiply that percent by the total program impact, and you get your claim of impact. So to use this example of that board service with the $60 an hour volunteerism, with the cost of the program being $700,000, you take that by the total lives improved, and as a result of your service, 132 lives were improved because of your volunteer efforts. And that's it. Monetize your service, quantify your impact, and calculate your claim. So now you can share your impact with your volunteers, leadership, nonprofit partners, and external stakeholders. And we have seen companies share their results internally on dashboards, to the board, in staff newsletters, on social media, ESG reports, and for public communication. And some final tips. One, take a little time to calibrate a measurement approach with your nonprofit partners. I do hope that Lee and Anna and I can talk more about this, because this is part of the journey, trying to figure out how measurement will work for all parties. And sometimes it feels like learning and leaning into hard things and communicating and over communicating. And two, skills-based service is so valuable. It really is worth the hassle of setup costs. Three, once you get data, bring in other people who get excited about sharing it. Communications and external reporting teams are so hungry to talk more about the work you do. Let them. And finally, ask nonprofits fewer questions and make every question count. Okay, let's chat. So hopefully, I just made measurement sound easy. Lee and Anna, what's it really like? Actually, whoever would like to go first, do you have any lessons or advice that you want to share about the process that you go through in monetizing volunteerism or calculating the claim of impact for your programs?
I'm happy to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Anna. I knew we were going to do it.
You sure? All right,
please go for it. Yeah,
I'll take this, and then that means that you can be more articulate after me. It's really nice to be here. Yeah, Anna. I've been at Deloitte for 12 years, 8 of those in the world of social impact. Definitely, yes, much more on the program management and administration of how we execute huge skills-based volunteering and pro bono efforts across our 5 U.S. businesses. And it's the best job I've had ever. So always excited to talk about this. Sadie, you hit on so many things when I think specifically about kind of lessons and advice around how we work with you. to measure the impact of this kind of in-kind work we're putting out there. There's a few kind of easy ones, right? It's like starting very early in the planning. So, if you're starting to think about it, set some really realistic goals for when you'll actually be interacting with these clients in the community, and give yourself a lot of upfront planning time to build a really full stakeholder list within your organization of everybody who needs to be brought along the journey early on, because building some really compelling momentum there is what's going to help this come to fruition. And it's going to help protect, right, your relationship with your nonprofit clients, because everybody is fully looped in. Connected to starting early, I think too, just knowing that the process for how data is collected is just as important as the questions that you ask. So just being really operationally tight is great. None of that can happen if you don't get smart quick. For us, that has meant having a partner like Sadie and True Impact to really understand not just their philosophy, but what is happening in this sector, to be well read, to understand their perspective, to ask really smart questions about the landscape. That's really critical. And I think finally, just to force myself to be brief, which is something I'm working on. I think you really have to find a way to add some fun into this for your stakeholders, because we might love this topic, but not everybody gets really pumped to survey a lot of people, right? One thing we're learning is any of our professionals, nonprofit collaborators, leaders at Deloitte, they get super excited about telling a story about the work they're doing in the community. And so the more we can link how we're going to measure impact with how we're going to tell the stories that are happening, the more momentum and enthusiasm we get for the whole process.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Anna, you covered so much ground. That was amazing.
Okay, you go first on the next question.
No, hi everyone. My name is Lee Fabiashi. Similarly, very excited to be here, and a topic that I'm very excited about, because we've all heard the adages of, you can't change it if you can't measure it. So have really benefited working from True Impact. Unlike Deloitte, a lot of our programs are much more immature, and I'm happy to do a deeper dive into sort of where we are in our life cycle. But we are focusing a lot on this past year, especially restarting our volunteer engagement program. So it's a lot of the hands-on, the fan favorite activities. And while that was great, I think what was helpful for us in terms of lessons learned and starting to measure things was to bring along our internal stakeholders for the journey. Anna touched on this sort of as you think about, again, the storytelling you want to do, but I had to win a little bit of the hearts and minds of my employee stakeholders, just to really understand that we want to know, of course, how, employee sentiment and how people are connected to our programs, but we also want to have them understand that we're trying to do more work than just episodic volunteering or a one-time activation. And so it was helpful to have those champions and those stakeholders really understand the process that we were hoping to accomplish with working with True Impact. And then once we had some of our outcomes and were able to show the connection between our efforts in the community and what we're trying to accomplish more broadly from our philanthropy strategy, they were the ones to, say, we should think about more skills-based, or how do we weave this in, a little bit more strategically. So I mention all this because it's, you have to kind of make people think it's their idea. So it was helpful to have my internal employee base feel that we should sort of evolve our programs. And similarly, when you work, with your community partners, really being mindful of the number of asks. Anna touched on this, but really being buttoned up operationally, that, this is in addition to, on top of a lot of other clients they're serving, their main clients they're serving, and in addition to their corporate partners. So how do you make it really easy for people? How do you make it tight questions? And then as you have the results, making sure that you're contributing to that ecosystem of sharing feedback, sharing things that they can use with other stakeholders. So Hope that's helpful. But again, Anna covered a pretty broad swath about sort of the lessons learned. And I will say it's really helpful to have a partner, whether it's Sadie or True Impact or others, because I remember coming to the table with like a little bit of like raw ingredients of like, okay, I was a new program where we're looking to launch things. We need to just show sort of first round what our impact could look like. And so just having a measurement thought partner think through what are the right questions to ask? How do you really tease out the most important nuggets? It just, we all wear a lot of hats. And I think being able to lean on the experts and really help pull out the key questions, pull out those key sources of information. It just was, again, helpful to have an external voice emphasize the things that maybe I wasn't thinking about.
Let's dig into that a little bit more. You shared about the balancing of high value volunteerism with fan favorite team building and hands-on service, kind of horses and hounds. And this is a tough spot to be in, balancing individual preferences with what may look better for the company or just be more meaningful for the nonprofit partners. Yep. Do you have any advice to give for how to navigate this or balance it?
Absolutely. So I mentioned I've been with Aries for a little bit over a year, and my understanding is the firm's efforts have really been grassroots and very employee directed, which is amazing from my standpoint because there's no shortage of interest. And sort of coming through the pandemic, it sounded like the efforts kind of hit their full stride in 2019, and then as the pandemic happened, it sort of fell off a cliff. So the goal last year was to restart the program, and that meant a lot of the fan favorites. Let's go with the names that people recognize. Oh, I remember doing that a couple of years ago, just to get that internal momentum. And working with True Impact, it was really helpful to show on the outside. Once we did we did a big activation called the Summer of Service, not so dissimilar from other firms around a month of service, and worked with True Impact to measure the impacts of each of those volunteer events. Again, mostly fan favorite. And so on the flip side of that, we were able to show that our hands-on service had a much lower monetized dollar value than a skills-based service. And so I mentioned that helped to sort of move the hearts and minds towards a more skills-based program as we think about the next evolution. And, this is my year 2 in managing the program space. But we still have to meet employees where they are. The runs, the walks, the cycling events, the summer picnics and with the local charity are still have a near and dear place to people's hearts. And so what we're working on is how do we think about the employee journey through our different programs. So if the entry point is a run or a walk or a home build, something that you kind of know as an average employee, what that means for your time and your service, how do we start there? But think about mapping them through, maybe they volunteer more than once. Do they volunteer on their own? Are they getting their team to organize an event? We have different internal committees. So can we think about someone going from a one-time volunteer to maybe applying to join a committee? Does that next level of service sort of think about nonprofit board service? Could we think about adding pro bono and attaching skills to their nonprofit volunteerism? So it's a little bit of an art and a science at the moment because we're trying to sort of plan for this future state of how we think about employees move through our philanthropic ecosystem. But in the short term, it means that we are meeting people where they are. So we're very much pushing these fan favorite, the runs, the walks, other events, but kind of planning in the future state of how we can evolve the program. And then something else I'll share is, we mentioned the benefit of working with really high value vendors who manage some of these sort of more skills-based programs from the onset and do it really well. And so we're working with an external vendor on a nonprofit board placement and training program, with the idea being that if we can think about our employees' time serving on a nonprofit board and having that service be, of course, amplified and a bit more meaningful than a one-time volunteer event, can we start to have those organizations become the episodic volunteering? So it feeds into that we have someone serving on the board, we're helping them from a financial commitment towards their give-get, and now we're working with that organization during our summer of service. So it just creates the story. And Anna mentioned this also, that it's that those nuggets, those little stories, of course you want to show the big meaningful impact and whatever that means for your firms, but we're just trying to find more ways to feed the kind of grassroots evolution, but also kind of plan for this bigger state where we're able to just hopefully have more skills-based service and have a higher value for our volunteers' time. I hope that's helpful. It's a lot of different directions there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Anna, does any of that resonate with your program? Both the balance between kind of
Yeah.
what you're sponsoring and what is coming from the bottom, and also thinking about uh, a professional and kind of philanthropic development pipeline.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's an incredible set of choices that you have to consider because I think for a lot of us, right, it's about finding the right mix. And if you try to lean in too much on, will we prioritize these issue areas over any other priorities, or we prioritize pro bono over cash donations, or you really do risk, you just really risk alienating people from wanting to participate and contribute. And, you know, we, again, like, the perspective I'm bringing is from just such a big, complex organization. But a great example for us, which I know is unique and always complicated for others, is that we look at pro bono in two ways. Like, we have kind of a top-down approach and a bottoms-up. And so when we say pro bono at Deloitte, we're actually talking about delivering work in the same way that we deliver paid client work, right? Because we're a professional services organization. It's every project is managed by a partner at the firm. There's a very formal application process. The professionals who do this work, they are billing hours, right, to contribute to the metrics they have to make, as opposed to being on a paid client project. So it's very, very it's very kind of formalized. And that's where there's a lot of ability for us in social impact strategy to say, this is a good fit, this isn't a good fit. But so that we don't miss the momentum of our people, right, we have skills-based volunteering programs, which for Deloitte is different than pro bono, even though externally it might look the same. And with those programs, those are very much kind of professional driven, they're entrepreneurial. There's no, the formality of approvals is less stringent. So Deloitte might not be prioritizing animal welfare, but if that's a huge source of interest in a specific city where we have an office and that's what talent wants to do, we might encourage them to do it through skills-based volunteering, which is similar but a little different. So there's some nuance there. I thought I'd just share that example as one.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So talk a little bit about your programs and your role there and where you are in the life cycle, because it sounds like you're coming from different kind of places in the development of each of your programs. Lee, do you want to go first?
Yeah, happy to. So I mentioned I've been with Aries for about a year and inherited, again, a lot of really wonderful grassroots employee-led momentum. So the goal last year was how to memorialize the things that people know and love. Can we create a calendar, a cadence to have people sort of anticipate when to expect they can get involved? And so we memorialize, again, I mentioned this, a summer of service. So it's global volunteer events. We have local champions. It's very much employee directed. These are the things that people know and love that are in their backyards. And so then by having employees be the champions, it's kind of removes the onus of an email from me saying, please, please, please volunteer, so they can go and rally their groups to participate. And so that's sort of what we memorialized last year. We launched this nonprofit board placement and training program, and we're going through our first cohort as they're moving through placement. So I'm hoping, again, like I mentioned, to have more of this touch points of different champions who are involved at a higher level of commitment to different nonprofit boards, that we can start to feed those organizations through different avenues of engagement. So we're very early on. I wouldn't say that we're immature. I think what's been interesting for me coming into this seat is that there's a bit of a almost like an internal education gap that we have to solve for, because the firm has done grassroots volunteerism, which means that people are bought in. There's no shortage of like buy-in or ideas, but the understanding of what volunteer time and impact can look like is still a little bit take the picture. Isn't this so nice? We're doing such amazing work, which we are. But I think something that my colleagues and I have talked about is that thinking about what's the why? Why are we doing this? Why is our time valuable? Why are we putting our employees' efforts towards these programs? Can we start to think about what's the real need of an organization? And would that mean instead of doing, a summer picnic, could we offer an HR clinic for the staff of the organization to talk through different hiring practices? Would that help them drive sort of more towards their strategy? So I'm laying the groundwork to kind of move those conversations, but we're very much in, the answer is yes to most things people say. I keep sort of saying it's like, let's test and adjust so that we're again, hearing employee voices, and to Anna's great point, not discouraging people, but it's just keeping sort of a North Star in mind of how we can think about what a larger impact can look like, always tying things back to the business. Right now, we're looking at the parallels between employee engagement as an ROI for the company, that we've all seen the research that engaged employees tend to stay with companies longer. They refer more people. They're happier. They have a more likelihood of moving up in different titles and positions in the company. So we're leaning really hard on that. But I think ultimately we're just going to have to sort of shift the conversation to, and again, having a partner like True Impact to measure your time to say, the 2 hours spent doing a hands-on, very traditional volunteer project versus 2 hours in pro bono services have a higher value to the organization. Let's make sure that we're maximizing our employees' time and having a higher value for our impact. So it's an evolution. It's something that, again, keeping sort of a few years down the line a North Star in mind. But right now it's let's get people into it. Also, like Anna's point about making it fun, like you have to just kind of bring the hype a little bit, and then slowly we can start to evolve and think more about what's the why, what are we driving towards, how do we connect back towards the business.
Anna,
Yeah.
where are you in your kind of measurement journey with the Deloitte Pro Bono program?
Where are we? We're refining. I feel like year after year, we're getting tighter and tighter. And it's, I think, like I said, getting really smart and having some really strong partners is the way that we do it. And, building a team that can really think strategically, not just about all indicators, right? What is everything we can measure, right? So like we working with True Impact, right? We can learn and we can talk about, real extensive surveys and the full gamut of what you can be asking and measuring for. I think what we're learning is we have to get really clear about like, what is it we're trying to say? Like, what is so important to us? Because when we try to, this is awful, Deloitte would say, boil the ocean, right? It doesn't work, and it can exhaust the process and the mechanism, and it can exhaust our stakeholders internally and externally. And so I think we're getting much better at understanding, right? Like pro bono, the professionals we have that serve on pro bono projects have a fabulous experience in so many ways. But there's 1,000 professionals who do that every year, and we are 160,000 people in the US. So it's not a talent engagement play, right? You have to really think about it in terms of scale. It's good. Talent has an engagement, like there's a connection, but you have to think about when we measure pro bono, when you think about the value, it's more important for us to understand the impact that those pro bono projects are having on the community, the organization, or any other ties. And so we do a lot of time thinking about like, okay, if we're going to measure the experience as well as our talent, you know, where does all of that content go and who should own that, right? You know, is that, does that live here, you know, with our team and social impact strategy, or does that live in real talent and the real talent engagement world at the firm? So I think we're just trying to get much tighter on what we're trying to say and what's most important in our measurement strategy. Yeah.
Can I just add
And
one
how do
point?
you-
I'm so sorry.
Yes.
Katie. Sorry.
No,
so
talk over me.
You know, Anna, hearing you talk, it's like so much of what you're describing, it feels like a future state also, because I recognize that as I'm sharing sort of where we are in our life cycle, it's still so internally focused. We're still looking at number of hours, events, global participation, et cetera. And I just think it speaks to a program being a little bit younger than what you have at Deloitte. And so I'm like, ooh, like taking notes down. I'm like, I want that. I want to let's get those nuggets, and where does it sit, and how do we refine like our external communication strategy? Sorry, just very inspired.
Yeah.
Sorry to cut you off. Yeah.
No.
I mean, and it just takes years of iterating, right?
Yeah.
So I will always iterate with you. It's fun.
Got your email address. Yeah.
Let's like take that. So where you are right now, how do you use data that you collect for nonprofit partners? Lee, do you want to go first, or Anna?
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, so with our nonprofit partners, I mentioned this. So we're working with a lot of different partners, and I think we don't, unlike Deloitte, have sort of like strategic employee engagement partners. Right now, it's very much employee directed. So it's nice because we have a wide range of different engagement opportunities and different partners, but we're not necessarily super focused. So the way I want to partner with organizations is always putting, of course, their needs first, but making sure that we keep the feedback cycles of passing information, passing feedback, passing the impact reports over to the organizations. And then also iterating our partnerships. A lot of these have been sort of, again, a friend of a colleague recommended an organization, and now somehow we work with them. So it's now that the door is open, how do we evolve that? We're using that as a feeder for the board placement program I mentioned. So those are just the ways that we want to make sure that we're putting sort of the needs of our community partners first, and then reverse engineering what the employee experience looks like. And something else I want to mention just in terms of how we're using feedback is, so that's sort of candidly sort of less focused on the nonprofit engagement. We want to be, of course, partners with them. But to my point about sort of using Anna's program as maybe a North Star to move towards, because we have so many, it's just hard to keep track of how we can best support them. But for the employee side, we're really making sure that we're refining our program offerings based on feedback. And so it's everything from very simple logistics, dates, times. This is, time of year is crazy for us to participate. But we actually launched another body of research looking at the social and emotional impacts of volunteering, as well as the professional development aspects of volunteering, and just trying to understand what transformation happens to an individual. So happy to share that with this group as I have permission to share those findings externally, but I just wanted to share it that we're constantly thinking about what are ways to tie back to the business, what are ways that we can demonstrate our commitment to these offerings, and how do we make sure that we're saying we're just not getting comfortable and kind of resting on what always worked. But yeah, I would love to selfishly very much hear about Anna's response to this one.
Yeah, I think we use it in a myriad of ways. So we tend to measure the experience of our professionals who are doing pro bono or skills-based volunteering work. We measure the leaders, right, who kind of oversee that, and then we measure through surveys the nonprofit clients who are receiving. And so what we do, how we leverage what comes back is used in very different ways. For the talent and leaders internally, we use the information they report back to inform a lot around, we kind of use it to go back to recruiting. We use it to think about what learning and development is needed of our people, to best prepare them to work alongside nonprofits to show up ready, to show up in the right way. The worst thing that you can do is send people out into an organization not really understanding the nonprofit world, different cultures, different ways that we work, right? And just the nuance of training, which we do rate our talent to talk about working alongside our community and not coming in and delivering work, right? That like just kind of coming in too big for your britches. We use it to inform performance management decisions. So at the end of the year, talent that has spent a great amount of time delivering on pro bono or being in the community to make sure that's reflected in how their performance is viewed, their professional life cycle at the company. Outside of talent, a lot of what we collect across the surveys, particularly from the clients, right, we use to inform our global reporting requirements, our ESG reporting requirements. This is more about good for the business, but, it helps us understand too how we are viewed, right, as a partner for industry awards, right, like the Civic 50, and making sure that our name is out there as a company that's doing good, which is how you attract talent to come to your organization. So there's a lot of looping there that's really important. I feel like I had one other important, and then it's informing the value of the relationship we have with an organization. It's saying, we did a great project. We accomplished what this organization needs. And now that's it. We can make a one and done investment. Or we learned so much about how this organization is really aligned with our social impact ambitions. And so we want to talk to them in greater detail about having a much more extensive relationship, which might mean we do pro bono and donations and look to help people serve on boards in different chapters. So it informs a lot of our strategic choices about the relationships we want to have.
Yeah, I'm taking notes.
I know, okay, that section of the recording,
check.
please.
Yeah. So I want to ask one more question, and then Lori, I'll sort of give it over to the audience. But what is one thing you wish you knew when you started measuring program outcomes? Lee, do you want to take it?
Anna, do you want to go? I feel like I've gone first.
Yeah, I'm trying to say something different that I haven't said already. I think I will go back to how important it is to look at a longer term game here. Not that it's a game, but just to be patient with right. If you are on this call and you are responsible for thinking about this and setting something up, like it just, you just don't rush it. I think it really requires getting to know the full spectrum of leadership in your organization to understand what their mandates are, right? And so that you're tying everything back to the core of your organization. It's the best way to be able to start working with a partner like Sadie to write out what you're actually asking of people. So nothing terribly new on this one, but I just think patience and having good partners and smart impact measurement experts is really critical to your success. And you can also start by picking and choosing. Like I just listed 14 things, that we're leveraging for. Pick one. Pick one and start, right? And then iterate on that.
Yeah, I mean, just building on that, being newer in the process, it's daunting. I've had those overwhelming moments of like, oh my gosh, like all we're doing is counting hours and people, and that's important. Start somewhere. Start, no matter what you're doing, start. But I think, to Anna's great point, I just think pick one thing. And so something that we've focused on is, the connection between performance evaluation and engagement. And so by starting there, it's helped us to build, again, more internal champions who are our colleagues in HR, but it's helped us also just to reemphasize the purpose of our programs from an employee standpoint, that we want to make sure that we're capturing this good work, and whether it could ultimately be a promotion criteria or whatever else, we're having those building conversations, but just starting with one thing. And then I'm very much guilty of this, is like, I go to the gym once, I'm like, I don't have abs, it's so weird. So I like giving yourself the patience that it just takes time, and you have to evolve and iterate, and you're gonna get it wrong, and that's okay. And how do you use everything that you have? So I'm very much in that patient state, and even talking through some of these, it's helpful to sort of have an external audience just understand that we're very much sort of early part of this process. And while I have long-term goals, of course, in mind, they may shift and evolve. So it's just giving yourself the structure, but also the flexibility to understand where you are today is not going to be where you are in a couple years. So yeah, again, just I think patience, and find those partners, because we can't do it on our own, for sure.
So Lori, we got a great question in the chat about using monetary value to demonstrate the impact of volunteer work, and whether work is seen as less impactful because there are areas where the value of service by monetary standards is less impactful. And I think that that's one of the special kind of balances here, is that if a program is generating more social impact, you'll know that, because we're not going to start and end with monetizing volunteerism. We're also asking what happened after that. And so there are instances where you have a really big impact program, and in this case, and I really do love the example. So Sarah Jane mentions the idea of education outreach in India reaching 1,000 people, and both the kind of monetary value of providing education outreach and the cost are at a certain level, but the impact is so large that the claim is still very large compared to a CV workshop that reaches 20 people in Japan. So again, while we talk a lot about high-skilled volunteerism and high value in this monetary sense, we wouldn't want to dismiss step 2, which is to talk about the community impact of that work.
Right. Great question, Sarah Jane. Did you want to add any comment to that? Thank you, Sadie, for that answer.
Thank you very much. Really helpful to understand that that discrepancy is taken into account in the model. That's really good to realize. And it is something that I'm thinking about more and more as we look at what we do at Fujitsu, and as we look at the financial impact of what we do, is just to avoid that very basic cost comparison without looking at impact. So thank you.
Yeah, great question. Great question. I'm wondering, I love the examples about how you both, Lee and Anna, use the data. And I never thought of some of the ways you do it at Deloitte. I love it on the performance management and showing employees the right way to volunteer alongside an organization. That's terrific. I wonder if, and I doubt this is the case for Deloitte or Aries Management, but Sadie, I wonder if you have seen companies who use this data to either justify their existence or to get more budget, because in our research we saw that this function can be pretty underfunded. So have you seen companies use it to for senior management to get more budget, for example?
You know, I think I used to think that I understood volunteerism and that volunteerism was unchanging. And then we had a global pandemic and everything changed. And these kind of like, oh, volunteer vacation, isn't this nice to do for our employees' experiences, started to be the literally only experience that they had getting to be with their colleagues and getting to see community members. That we were deploying these surveys during COVID, and you know, the actual volunteer work that people were doing, dropping off their neighbors' medications, were the only time they were leaving the house. And the level of satisfaction and, you know, the depth of the employee need as well as the community need just like changed the numbers. Very satisfied was not like a high enough range for how much people needed to have this in their lives. And I think that we had, you know, it with our volunteers sort of survey clients often talk about like showing that this work is meaningful and giving it numbers so that it's easier to talk about. But that was the kind of wow moment where it really came down to like it's like oh man, rescue dogs, like who rescued who? Like employees are like, please, I just need to see a person. I will drive groceries. I will write letters. You know, this had a totally different level of power in facilitating human connection during a time when we were doing the right thing and not communicating with strangers.
I'll add an example to that at Deloitte. I think that maybe we have somebody not unmute. I'll talk anyway. I think the pandemic may have helped save what our annual day of service that Deloitte does, which is a day where in all of the different cities where we have offices across the country, I'm sure many of you have this with your companies, we organize traditional volunteerism. And, you know, every 5 years or so, the company will visit, right? Is this still a good use of our money, of our budget? It's a huge expense, huge. And it, you know, takes up 50% of our staff who sit in marketplaces organizing this for the year, just to plan this one day. When you look at like impact to the organizations, it's one day of volunteerism, right? It's not a huge impact to the organization. It is what we learn and continue to learn. It is a huge impact to talent, morale, and engagement and building those connections. And it was only accentuated by the pandemic and the need to be with each other.
Thank you. That's terrific. Great explanations. And thank you, all three of you, Sadie, for one of the clearest explanations I've ever seen on how to measure impact. Thank you for that. And to Lee and Anna for sharing their experiences. Really useful, really useful. And GCVC will meet again soon on another webinar, and we will meet in person in Lisbon, May 9th and 10th, one day for general discussion. Day 2 will be a forum on disaster volunteering, sadly very timely, but we will be talking about the role of volunteers and how we can be effective, particularly in short and long-term recovery. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you again soon.
Lori, thank you. And Lee, Anna, what a delight.
Hugs. That's great. Thank you.
Likewise.
Awesome.
Lori, we'll meet you in Lisbon.
Yeah, sounds great. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Sounds good.
Thank you.
Thank you.